Well, it's a little hard to see what the shape of the boat is when it's standing on end like that, so Greg actually made me a drawing. You see an outboard on the end there, and still plan on doing a hydraulic drive, but if we run out of time, I can throw an outboard on there. But this is what I hope it should look like. And then that thing coming out the side with the chair on it and the little boat next to it, that's a floating dock. It'll be pinned to the barge. Hopefully we can get that thing on there. But it's time to get back to work. So next we'll keep putting on the side. I had a string line just going from the front and rear rake. That way I could throw in these 4-foot long side panels. Didn't have to use a level or anything. Since the string line is a straight line and it's level, you just flush it with the back side of the plates and set it next to the string line and tack it all together. It's one advantage of building this thing standing up on end. And then next on top of those side plates is the C-channel. So we'll start tacking that one in, and to get it straight I had to clamp one side of it to close in the gap as I went down. So I'd work on the C-channel, had a little bit of a bow in it, so you'd weld one side, go down to the end, lift it or raise it and lower it, and then keep tacking it in a little bit more. And then it wasn't quite long enough, so cut another 5-foot section, welded on this eye hook so we could crane in the next one to get the whole 25 feet. And 25 feet is actually how big the boat itself is going to be on the cabin part, and then the front and rear decks will be 5 foot each. And then after that, once the side panel was in, I could start going back to welding the plates to the pipes completely, filling in the gaps. Really wanted that top side on to keep the plates from warping. With the side, it should keep the plates nice and straight when we start applying a lot of heat. And well, I decided to do 60-10. So here's Greg here running a root in, and we decided to do roots instead of just fillet joints. And the reason I wanted to do a little test, you know, a lot of people love MIG welding. It's really fast. I'm okay with it. I'm good at it. I just don't really like it all that much because it doesn't give you a whole lot of strength. So I set up a little test here. What I want to do is show you when you run a 60-10 root stick welding, and that's what you're seeing right here. The stick is on the other side of the joint, and this is the exact metal that's on the boat. The left side is the round pipe, it's a piece of it cut out, and the right side is the 3/16 inch plate. I want to show you that you can push that puddle through the 3/16 plate. Not completely, we'd have to run a bevel and actually get the weld to come almost on the other side. So we've got the XMT set to 105 amps and arc force set all the way up. Right here running a little bit of manipulation, but another thing I wanted to show is that you don't have to run a very wide bead when running 60-10. The point is to push it through the 3/16. Because if you can get your weld to go all the way through the 3/16 plate, you don't need it built up past the plate at all. So here's what the finished weld looked like. Now let's run some MIG welds. We set it to constant voltage and 27 volts, and then on Doug's 12 VS we've got it set to 243 inches per minute, running 035 wire, and you can see it's putting a lot of heat into that plate. But as we zoom in, you can also see that there's no fire or weld coming through the plate. It's only laying on the outside, the other side of that joint, the side that the MIG gun is on. And on this side, absolutely nothing. So this is the gap that we have, and the reason we left that is to let the weld actually go into the gap. And that's what the finished MIG weld looked like. And then on this side you can see there's no weld that penetrated through. And MIG runs a lot of current. Check out that 2-aught welding cable, burnt right through it. And that extension cord was laying under it and it got burnt too. So now I want to cut these coupons, and let's take a side look at them and see what that penetration looks like. So we've got stick weld on both sides of this joint, and look, just a tiny hole. It's very small. That's all that's left in the middle of the plate that the stick weld did not get to. That's 35 thousandths of an inch, about square size. That's not bad. And then down here we've got MIG on this side and MIG on that side. And same thing, we were trying to fill that gap. And look here, that line between the plate and the pipe, the entire plate has 0 penetration. And we put the calipers on it, that's 265 thousandths, or even bigger than the plate itself, of weld where it did not get through. So here's the welds on the boat itself, and this is the root pass. So the 6010, and they came out pretty good for running such a violent rod. It's hard to stay focused because you can't mess up with that rod or you'll leave a hole. And then we did go back over that with MIG to make sure it was waterproof. And what you're seeing right here, yeah, that's not welding. That's the stinger laid up on the ladder, and one of the pieces of plastic broke. So I had a fun time giving Greg some crap about that. It's no big deal. Stingers are like 25 bucks for the Chinese versions. And then it was back to more welding, running that root in. And like I said, once the root's in, we go back over it with MIG. MIG is so easy to lay a weld that has 0 imperfections to make sure it's waterproof and to cover up anything that was wrong with the root pass. And I'm not a fan of carrying this thing around, so I ended up putting it on my crane so I could move the 12VS easier, because you've got a 44-pound roll of wire in it, and I think the case weighs 30-something pounds alone. And once all the root and the cover passes were in, we could go back and start putting in the struts. So I used a laser to lay out where the struts go. We're going to run 2 struts in the floor. I think the boat would probably survive without them, but the point of them is all that water pressure is going to bend the floor, it's going to bow, it's going to push, because each square inch, and there's a lot of square inches in a 5x10 sheet, of water pressure is pushing up against it. So I want to keep it as flat as possible. But I don't work on Sundays. I like to take a break and refresh the body, so we took a nice relaxing day on the river. And this is kind of what it's going to look like where I'll be anchored going into school, but not the exact same spot. It was a great day. Well, the boat is ready to be flipped. So Greg's got this excavator on his property, and we figured if we could get it moved over to the site, it could actually pick up the whole dang boat on its own, instead of us having to orchestrate between several vehicles. But it has a problem. The tensioner that pushes on that idler gear is bad. It's seized up. It's not keeping tension on the track. So that's what we had to do, is use a porter power to actually push the tensioner out. I mean, it was seized in there. Big sledgehammer, 12-pound hammer hits would not make it move.
I'm glad you weighed as much as you did.
I know.
I wouldn't have been able to get it up.
I almost didn't get it up. Well, eventually with the porta power, it did start moving, and that conversation about I'm glad you weigh as much as you do, he only got a 4-ton porta power, so it's 8,000 pounds of pressure, and I had to stand on the lever and jump up and down to make it move. So yeah, if I didn't weigh as much as I did, there was no way it was going to go. And then we had to keep swapping out spacers, because the more it pushes, it also moves the hydraulic hose into a bad spot, so we'd have to put a spacer in and kind of reset it so we could do another push. And even here, it's taken probably 1,000 pounds to push it. And we knew it'd be seized from rust, but
It's broken. Yep, broken springs.
Yeah, that spring was destroyed, and that's why we couldn't get it to move. Well, we had a hard time trying to find springs locally. We found one in Tennessee, and we found a couple on the internet, but new ones are thousands of dollars. So we just need to get this thing over there, and once it's near the boat, it doesn't have to drive around much, if at all. So this is us putting the track back on, and what we did is we're using the porter power to put pressure on that front idler gear. We figure if we can get enough pressure on the track, that'd be good enough just to drive it over there. I'm sure a few of you are laughing at us because we're not experts on putting this thing back on, and I really don't care. You can either keep your comments to yourself or put them in the comments section. Nobody really gives a crap. So all we need to do is get it back on and move on with our day.
Kind of like we know what we're doing.
How'd it do? So here we are connecting the Porta Power ram back to the pump so we can put pressure on and see if this thing has any chance of working. And look at that. It's moving that gear just fine. And there's the foot of the Porta Power pushing against the gear right there.
Right there. Yep.
Well, we tracked it over, and this is as far as it made. Yep, she died right there. So the final drive, the hydraulic gear motor that's right there at the end, the drive sprocket, yeah, she gave up the ghost. And Greg said the stick felt tight and it got hard to move, and just fluid came from everywhere. So we won't be able to use that, so we're going to go back to the original plan. So here's the rigging that we're going to use. We've got that big strap tied to the inside and top of the boat, and then that little strap tied to the inside and the top of the boat, and then these chains wrapped around the base of the boat, the side, running back to the tree. And then here's that chain on the end that went up to the excavator, and then the big strap that's going to run up to the crane on my truck on Little Red. And then we're also going to use the skid steer on this side to help lower it down, and there's another chain at the bottom right there running back to a tree, and those are so the base can't kick out as we're lowering it. You know, we can control the top, but if the bottom were to slip out, that'd be bad news bears. So we'll see if this thing is gonna work. We got it all rigged up, and the only thing left to do is cut the kickers out and get them out of the way. And that's my dad. I really appreciated his help that day. So what we're doing here is we're going to hook a chain to the top of one of the pipes to the skid steer and back up with the skid steer and pull the boat over, pull it towards us so it'll fall, and the crane and the Mini X can catch it, and then we can take the chain off and use the skid steer as well and orchestrate between all three and get it on the ground. While we're orchestrating getting this thing down, I know a lot of you are over here on this channel from Doug's channel. You watched him build that boat just like I did for a very long time. Even before I was in the military, I watched him. I think some of you may be watching dreaming about it. I know some of you are into boats, have built boats, and you're just watching another fellow boat builder. But I want to say, if some of you are watching and have never tried this, you need to go for it. You need to just put your feet forward, put your money where your mouth is, and go for it. It is well worth it. And not just to own a boat or just the building experience, but things just happen when you build a boat. The people you meet, the situations that come up, the things that you would have never dreamed of having, being given to you, yeah, you need to just go ahead and quit watching the videos and go build a boat. It's been pretty awesome. You know, building this thing is kind of how I've became friends with Greg, and him letting me stay here on his property. It's a big deal. And then all of the people that I've met through Greg is just absolutely phenomenal. Things I would have never dreamed of if I hadn't at least tried. Well, now that the crane and the Mini X have the weight, I can go back and unhook the chain and grab the bucket with the skid steer. crane backed up, we can then use the Mini X and the skid steer and keep on lowering it. And we repeated that a few more times so that we lower the crane a little bit, drive the truck forward, use the Mini X and the skid steer to back into the truck a little bit more. And because by rating, the truck's crane is strong enough to do it on its own, but this way it's less chance of failure. Those chains on the bottom of the boat keeping it from sliding, kicking out from under us, are really doing what we need them to, and keeping a big shock load from hitting the crane if the boat were to slide out off of its off of the floor that it's sitting on right now. Well, right about here, the old camera overheated and, well, just shut down. So I learned that lesson. Next, I'm going to have to invest in another camera and have at least two going at all times. But here it is. She's on the ground, and I can get to doing final welds on the side and welding in the other stiffener. We got down without anybody getting hurt. It was a good day. Well, the day before we went to put it down, I had surgery. And what you're seeing right here, these welds in the rain, was 2 days after surgery. And I got to the full exhaustion. I couldn't hold my right arm up anymore. I couldn't physically keep welding. My knees hurt. I got some kind of allergic reaction from the surgery. And yeah, I was just completely done. I had been pushing as hard as I possibly could. This was filmed, I don't know, 10 days ago. So the first part of this video was actually only like a 5-day span. Got a lot done in those few days. But yeah, I hit the wall. So I'm not going to be able to get this thing done before school. Well, at least I'm not going to keep pushing to try and get this thing done in the next 3 weeks. So I'm going to get back to just enjoying life, working on the boat when I can. Greg's going to let me stay on the property. I might be able to use one of his campers. And I can get back to fixing things like this car. If you recall, on the last time I worked on it, I think the title of the video was like fixing the car and using the crane. At the end, one of the problems I was unable to fix was putting gas in the car. When you try to fill it up through the bottleneck, the filler neck, it wouldn't accept gas. It would overflow and kick back out. So this is actually a brand new filler neck. I've already replaced it, and that didn't fix it, which is what usually the problem is. So I want to go ahead and drop the fuel tank, but first I'm going to drain it into these buckets. And then I'm checking the vent lines coming out of the tank, like this one right here. So I'm using this file and putting it into the hole to make sure there's nothing obstructing that hole, like rust. And so once that one was clear, we'll go ahead and drop this tank so the exhaust pipe is in the way. So let's pull this exhaust hanger. Oh, and this is my friend Josh's shop. He's letting me use his 2-post lift. Thank you, Josh. So next, this vent line goes to that valve. That valve is an emergency valve, so if the car flips over It's got a float that would shut off. It would raise or lower towards the ground and keep fuel from exiting the tank. And it was all clear and functioning properly, so next I'm going to check this charcoal canister. The gases go in one side and come out the other, and then there's a couple of vacuum control lines, and then this diaphragm right here goes up and down, piece of rubber inside of there. Vents on the top, because when that rubber moves it has to actually push, and you can see it has to push air out, and you can see inside of that vent it's clogged. So we got a few things coming out of there, but I don't think that's enough to completely stop it from working. So once I had it done, I was almost about to give up, and then there's this hose. This is where all the gases exit the vehicle, and it was completely clogged. Looks like poop to me. Oh, and I got some new boots, because these old Irish setters I was using, yeah, I've had them for 7 months, and they're completely destroyed. So I do not recommend Irish setter. A big pile of cold dog poo. So let's see if this thing works. And it sure did. I'm able to put gas in the car now to commute back and forth to school. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Yeah, if you stick around, the next video, it may not be the very next one that comes out, but I've got one coming out from a 3-day trip I took with Greg, and we had a blast. Speaking of blast, Chris gave me his spare sandblaster, so we'll cover that in the trip. That's actually why we went there, and we did some other things, some pretty crazy things. You'll just have to wait and see. Got a little wild.